Picture this. You're watching the news and things are escalating fast. Civil unrest in 3 major cities, supply chain failures spreading like wildfire, and suddenly that bug-out plan you've been mentally rehearsing for years feels like it needs to happen right now. So you grab your pre-packed bag, load up the truck, and head for that cabin in the woods. But here's what most preppers discover way too late. Within 48 hours, you're in gridlocked traffic with a quarter tank of gas, your kids are crying, and you've blown through half your emergency food. Let me tell you something that's going to completely change how you think about bug-out plans. Statistically, you're about 10 times more likely to die during an evacuation than by staying put in your home. This comes from actual FEMA data. But here's the thing that blows my mind. We've somehow convinced ourselves that bugging out is this romantic adventure where we'll grab our bags and live off the land, when in reality, bugging out is one of the most dangerous, physically exhausting decisions you can make, and it should be your absolute last resort. The weight problem is where most bug-out plans die before you even make it to your vehicle. And I'm not talking about whether your bag feels heavy when you're testing it in your living room. I'm talking about the brutal physical reality of carrying 40, 50, or 60 pounds of gear on your back for hours or even days when things don't go according to plan. Because here's what nobody tells you. The average person in decent physical condition can reasonably carry about 20% of their body weight for extended distances. So if you weigh 180 pounds, that's 36 pounds total, including your pack, water, food, and every single item you're bringing with you. But when most people actually weigh their loaded bug-out bags, they're looking at 50 to 70 pounds or more because they've packed for every possible scenario instead of accepting the hard truth that you cannot bring everything you might need. And this is absolutely critical because when you're carrying too much weight, you slow down dramatically, you fatigue way faster, you become more susceptible to injury, and you make yourself an incredibly easy target for anyone who wants to take your supplies because you literally cannot move quickly enough to avoid confrontation or escape dangerous situations. The solution isn't buying some fancy ultralight gear that costs 3 times as much as regular equipment, though that can help if you can afford it. The real solution is completely rethinking what you actually need versus what makes you feel more prepared. Your bug-out bag should be built around the rule of 3s, which says you can survive 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter in harsh conditions, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So your priorities need to be shelter, water purification, and fire starting, with everything else being secondary or even optional depending on your specific situation and destination. A quality tarp like the Aqua Quest Defender weighs about 2 pounds and provides way more versatility than a tent that weighs 5 or 6 pounds and only works in specific conditions, while a Sawyer Mini water filter weighs 2 ounces and can purify 100,000 gallons of water, making it essentially unlimited water access for the weight of a couple of AA batteries. And for fire starting, you need redundancy. So a Bic lighter weighs half an ounce, ferro rods weigh about the same, and waterproof matches add maybe another ounce, giving you 3 completely different fire-starting methods for less weight than a single can of soda. But here's something most folks never consider about bug-out bags. You're not packing for a camping trip. You're packing for the worst-case scenario where you might need to move quickly through hostile or dangerous environments while avoiding other people who might want to take what you have. So your bag needs to be organized for rapid access to critical items, with your most important gear in exterior pockets or the top of your pack where you can reach it without unpacking everything else. And the color of your bag and gear matters way more than most people realize, because that bright red or orange pack that looks great in outdoor gear catalogs makes you incredibly visible to anyone scanning the area, while earth tone colors like coyote brown, olive drab, or gray help you blend into natural and urban environments. The 5.11 Rush 72 bag comes in multiple colors and has this brilliant organization system with tons of MOLLE webbing, though at 3.6 pounds empty it's on the heavier side, while the Mystery Ranch 3-Day Assault Pack weighs about 4 pounds but distributes weight so efficiently that it feels significantly lighter than cheaper packs carrying the same load. Transportation assumptions completely destroy most bug-out plans because everyone assumes they'll be able to drive to their destination, but road systems collapse way faster than you'd expect during mass evacuations. And I'm not just talking about traffic jams. I'm talking about roads becoming completely impassable due to accidents, abandoned vehicles, roadblocks, or authorities controlling who can travel where. Hurricane Katrina showed us this in devastating detail, with people stuck on highways for 10 to 12 hours trying to travel distances that normally take 2 hours, and many people running out of gas while sitting in gridlocked traffic and having to abandon their vehicles, which created even more obstacles for everyone behind them. And this is where it gets really interesting, because when you plan your bug-out routes, you absolutely cannot rely on major highways or even secondary roads during a serious crisis, because everyone with a vehicle will be using those same routes, creating bottlenecks and dangerous situations where desperation leads to violence as people compete for limited space and resources. Here's what nobody tells you about alternative routes. You need to scout them physically before you need them, not just look at them on a map or satellite images, because what looks like a viable dirt road on Google Maps might be completely washed out, blocked by fallen trees, or impassable in certain weather conditions. So actually drive or walk your backup routes during different seasons and times of day, taking notes about potential problems, places where you could get stuck, water crossings that might be dangerous during rain, and locations where you could be trapped or ambushed if things go sideways. And while everyone else is planning to bug out by vehicle, you need to have realistic plans for traveling on foot, because your vehicle might break down, run out of gas, or become more of a liability than an asset in certain situations. The average person walks about 3 miles per hour on flat terrain, but that drops to 1 or 2 miles per hour when you're carrying a heavy pack, dealing with rough terrain, or trying to move through areas while avoiding detection. So if your bug-out location is 100 miles away and you end up on foot, you're looking at 50 to 100 hours of walking time, which translates to 4 to 7 days of travel if you're maintaining a reasonable pace and resting appropriately. But that timeline extends dramatically if you have children, elderly family members, or anyone with mobility issues. The destination problem is where most preppers' entire strategy falls apart, because they've picked locations based on romantic ideals rather than practical reality. And I see this constantly with people planning to bug out to national forests or remote wilderness areas where they imagine they'll live off the land and wait out whatever crisis is happening. But here's the brutal truth that most survival instructors won't tell you, because it destroys the fantasy. You cannot live off the land for extended periods unless you have serious skills, extensive knowledge of the local environment, and ideally, pre-positioned supplies and shelter. The idea that you'll hunt and forage your way through a long-term crisis is completely unrealistic, because game animals disappear incredibly quickly. When thousands of other people have the same idea, edible wild plants require extensive knowledge to identify safely and provide way fewer calories than most people imagine, and you'll be burning 3,000 to 5,000 calories per day just trying to survive and find food, creating this terrible equation where you're expending more energy than you're able to obtain from your environment. Your bug-out location needs to be somewhere you have either legal permission to be or legitimate ownership rights, because showing up on someone else's property during a crisis is a fantastic way to get shot or arrested, even if that property happens to be public land where camping is normally allowed. And this is absolutely critical, because during declared emergencies, authorities often restrict access to public lands and parks, making your carefully planned bug-out location completely off limits just when you need it most. The solution is establishing your bug-out location before you need it, whether that means buying a small piece of land, arranging explicit agreements with family or friends in other areas, or joining a mutual aid group where multiple families have coordinated bug-out plans and shared resources. And whatever location you choose, you need to visit it regularly, ideally staying there for extended periods during different seasons, so you understand the challenges you'll face, the resources that are actually available, and the skills you'll need to make that location viable for long-term occupation. Here's something that catches people completely off guard about bug-out locations. The supplies you cache there will deteriorate, get stolen, or be discovered by animals if you're not maintaining them properly. So rotation becomes incredibly important with food supplies that need checking every 6 to 12 months, batteries that lose charge over time, medications that expire, and equipment that can develop problems from temperature fluctuations, moisture, or simple age. Food-grade buckets with Gamma Seal lids provide reasonably good protection for dry goods, while you need to bury or heavily disguise any caches, because anything visible will eventually be found by hunters, hikers, property owners, or other people who might be scouting the same areas you've chosen. And never put all your supplies in a single location, because if that cache is discovered or destroyed, you've lost everything. So split your supplies into multiple smaller caches spread across your bug-out location, with basic necessities in each cache, so losing one doesn't completely compromise your ability to survive. The skills gap is probably the single biggest vulnerability in most people's bug-out plans because they've spent thousands of dollars on gear while spending almost no time developing the actual skills needed to use that gear effectively under stress. And let me tell you something that's going to change how you approach preparedness. Your gear is only as good as your ability to use it when you're cold, wet, exhausted, and dealing with the psychological pressure of a real emergency. So that fancy water filter doesn't help you if you don't know how to identify water sources or understand that even filtered water from certain sources can make you sick, because filters remove bacteria and protozoa but don't remove viruses, chemical contamination, or heavy metals. And your fire-starting gear is useless if you don't understand fire-building principles, can't identify dry tinder in wet conditions, or haven't practiced enough to start fires reliably when your hands are cold and shaking from stress and exhaustion. Shelter building separates people who can actually survive from people who just own a lot of survival gear, because constructing effective shelter from natural materials or using tarps efficiently requires hands-on practice that you absolutely cannot learn from YouTube videos alone. So get out there and actually build shelters in different conditions, sleep in them overnight when it's uncomfortable, and learn what works and what fails before you're doing this for real when failure means hypothermia or heat exhaustion. And navigation skills become absolutely critical when GPS systems fail, your phone dies, or you're trying to move through unfamiliar areas while avoiding roads and trails. Learning to use a compass properly takes maybe 2 hours of practice, but most people never bother to learn because they assume their phone will always work, which is an incredibly dangerous assumption during any serious crisis. Orienteering competitions and wilderness navigation courses provide realistic practice that reveals your actual skill level rather than your imagined capabilities. And these skills decay if you don't practice them regularly. So quarterly practice sessions keep your skills sharp enough to actually use when you need them most. Physical fitness is the foundation that every other aspect of bugging out depends on. And this is where most people's plans crash into reality because they've never actually tested whether they can physically do what their plan requires. And I'm not talking about whether you can walk a mile or carry your pack around your backyard. I'm talking about whether you can carry a 30-pound pack for 15 miles through rough terrain, then set up shelter, gather water, and cook food when you're already exhausted. Because here's what nobody tells you. The first few days of bugging out will be the most physically demanding experience most people have ever had. And if you're not in good cardiovascular shape with reasonable muscular endurance and joint stability, you're going to break down fast, developing blisters, muscle strains, or worse injuries that can completely immobilize you when you're miles from any medical help. The solution isn't becoming some kind of ultramarathon runner or gym rat, though better fitness always helps. The solution is progressive training that specifically prepares your body for the demands of your bug-out plan, which means weighted ruck marches starting with lighter loads and shorter distances, then gradually increasing both as your body adapts. The military uses this progression to build up new recruits, starting with 25-pound packs for 3 miles and eventually working up to 50-pound packs for 12 miles or more. And this progression typically takes 3 to 6 months of consistent training. But here's the thing. Most people never do this training because it's uncomfortable and time-consuming, so they assume they'll rise to the occasion when needed, which is a fantasy that can literally kill you because your body doesn't magically develop capabilities it hasn't trained for just because the situation is serious. Group dynamics absolutely destroy more bug-out attempts than almost any other single factor because traveling with multiple people, especially families with children, introduces complications that most planning completely ignores. And this is where most people's plans completely fall apart because they've imagined bugging out alone or with one other capable adult, when in reality, they're going to be responsible for children, elderly parents, or people with medical conditions that require special considerations. Children under 10 can rarely carry meaningful amounts of weight for extended distances, so adults end up carrying extra supplies on top of their own gear, while elderly family members might not be able to maintain the pace necessary to reach your destination before supplies run out or conditions become more dangerous. And people with chronic medical conditions create additional vulnerabilities because medications might not be available, regular treatments might not be possible, and the physical stress of bugging out can trigger medical emergencies that would be manageable at home but become life-threatening when you're miles from any medical care. Here's something most folks never consider about group dynamics. Decision-making becomes incredibly complicated when you have multiple people with different risk tolerances, physical capabilities, and priorities. So establishing clear leadership and decision-making protocols before you need them prevents arguments and delays when you're facing time-sensitive decisions that could determine whether everyone survives. And this absolutely cannot be figured out during the crisis itself, because stress destroys people's ability to compromise and see other perspectives. So family meetings and realistic practice scenarios where you work through difficult decisions help you understand who should lead, how decisions will be made, and what to do when people disagree about critical choices. While children need age-appropriate explanations and responsibilities that make them feel included rather than burdensome, because kids can tell when adults are stressed, and their anxiety feeds off that stress, creating behavioral problems that make everything harder for everyone. The psychological collapse that happens during extended bug-out scenarios is something most preppers never prepare for because they're focused on physical survival while completely ignoring the mental and emotional toll of leaving everything behind. And let me tell you something that disaster psychology research has shown repeatedly. Most people experience something similar to grief when they evacuate their homes because you're not just leaving a building, you're leaving your sense of security, your routines, your community, and all the physical things that represent your life and identity. And this grief manifests as denial, anger, depression, and eventually acceptance. But not everyone moves through these stages at the same pace, creating conflicts within groups where some people want to turn back while others want to keep moving forward. And these conflicts can tear groups apart right when unity is most critical for survival. Children and teenagers struggle even more because they don't have the cognitive development or life experience to understand why they're being forced to leave their home, their friends, their possessions, and everything familiar. So they act out, shut down emotionally, or develop physical symptoms from psychological stress that mimic illness and require time and attention that you might not have to spare. And the solution isn't ignoring these psychological realities or telling people to toughen up, because that approach just drives the problems underground where they fester and explode later. The solution is acknowledging that everyone will struggle emotionally, creating space for people to express their feelings appropriately, and maintaining routines and familiar comforts whenever possible, because eating the same breakfast your family normally eats provides psychological anchoring even when everything else has changed dramatically. Security concerns during bug-out scenarios are completely different from home defense because you're mobile, visible, and carrying everything you own on your back, making you an attractive target for anyone who needs supplies or just wants to take from others rather than prepare themselves. And this is where it gets really interesting, because most preppers imagine they'll defend themselves with weapons if confronted, but the reality is that any confrontation should be avoided at all costs, because even if you win, you might sustain injuries that become infected, you'll definitely draw attention to yourself and your supplies, and you'll create enemies who might pursue you or ambush you later. So the absolute best security strategy is not looking like you have anything worth taking, which means earth tone colors instead of tactical gear, used and worn equipment rather than brand new gear that screams you just spent thousands on preparedness supplies, and traveling during low visibility times like dawn, dusk, or night, when fewer people are moving around and you're less likely to encounter others. But here's what nobody tells you about security during a bug out. Weapons create this false sense of security that can actually make you less safe, because carrying visible weapons makes you look like a threat or a challenge to other armed groups, while making you a priority target for anyone who wants weapons more than they want your food or water. So concealed carry provides protection without advertising your capabilities, while less lethal options like pepper spray give you tools to de-escalate situations without creating the all-or-nothing dynamic that firearms introduce. And this is absolutely critical because the goal isn't winning fights, it's avoiding them entirely while reaching your destination as safely and quickly as possible, which means swallowing your pride, appearing weak or scared if that keeps you safe, and understanding that your ego is worth way less than your life or the lives of people depending on you. So there you have it. Everything you need to understand about why bugging out should be your absolute last option rather than your primary plan, because staying home gives you shelter, supplies, community, and familiarity that you completely lose the moment you hit the road. And the key thing to remember is that preparedness isn't about having the perfect bug out bag or knowing the fastest route out of town. It's about developing the judgment to know when bugging out is actually necessary versus when you're just panicking, combined with the skills and fitness to execute that plan, if you truly have no other choice. Start by making your home as resilient as possible with supplies, security, and backup systems that let you shelter in place during most emergencies. Then develop your physical fitness gradually through progressive training that prepares your body for real demands rather than imagined capabilities. Build relationships with neighbors and like-minded people who can provide mutual support when staying put becomes difficult but not yet impossible. And most importantly, test your bug-out plan through realistic practice that reveals gaps and weaknesses before you're doing this for real when failure means injury, death, or watching your family suffer because your plan was based on fantasy rather than brutal reality. When you're truly prepared, you understand that bugging out is an absolute last resort reserved for situations where staying home will definitely kill you, and even then you're accepting enormous risks and hardships because you literally have no other viable options, because the goal isn't surviving disasters by running away from them. It's creating such deep resilience at home that you can weather almost anything while maintaining your quality of life, helping your neighbors, and preserving your community rather than abandoning everything at the first sign of trouble. So if this video helped you think more critically about bug-out plans and why staying put is usually the better choice, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because I've got tons more content coming that challenges conventional prepper wisdom with practical reality based on actual disaster research and hard-won experience. And share this video with anyone who needs to hear this reality check, because the prepper community needs fewer fantasies about running to the woods and more focus on building genuine resilience where we actually live.